Welcome back to the table. This episode is supported by MK Army Heal Energy, a founding partner of the Roundtable for Men. Built for long days and real work. Fuel the fearless. Last week we talked about identity. We talked about the roles we carry: husband, father, provider, employee, leader. And we talked about what happens when those roles become our entire identity. There is something else that changes as we get older. Something that most men experience, but very few men talk about. And that's friendships. Because when we're young, friendship seems easy. They're everywhere: school, sports, neighborhoods, work. We're constantly surrounded by people. But as men get older, something starts to happen. The circle gets smaller, the phone gets quieter, the invitations become less frequent. And eventually, a lot of men find themselves looking around and realizing they don't have the friendships they once did. Not because anyone did anything wrong, not because there was some huge fight. Life just happened. And today we're talking about the friendships men lose. So come on in, get comfortable, and pull up a chair. I think one of the reasons adult friendships feel difficult is because most of us remember a time when it wasn't. When we were kids, friendships happened naturally. You showed up to school, you showed up to practice, you showed up to church, you showed up to the neighborhood basketball court, and there were always people there. You didn't have to schedule anything. You didn't have to coordinate calendars. You didn't have to worry about work schedules. You just showed up and friends formed. I still remember when I was younger and in high school. In my freshman year, I was a new kid. I had just moved from Austin to Cedar Park. I had no friends at my new school. But that's when I met my best friend, Coulter. We've been friends for 20 years now. I do have a few friends from my middle school era that I am still friends with, but as an adult with the family and my friends being adults with families, time is a scarcity for all of us. In high school, Coulter helped me get into athletic training, and that helped me make more friends through sports, specifically football. And that's how I fell in love with football. But those friendships were easy. Those friendships didn't require us rearranging our schedule so that we could enjoy our friends. And I think that's what changes as we get older. Back then, if somebody wanted to hang out, they called or they knocked on your door, and within 5 minutes, you were gone. There wasn't a discussion about calendars. There wasn't a discussion about work schedules. There wasn't a discussion about whether the kids had practice that night. You just went. And the funny thing is, when you're living in that moment, you don't realize how valuable it is. You think that's how life will always be. You think your friends will be always be right there. You think there will always be another football game, another practice, another weekend, another chance to hang out. But then graduation happens. People move. People get married. People start careers. People have children. And slowly, without anybody making the decision, things start to change. The conversations become less frequent. The phone calls become less frequent. You still care about each other. You're still friends, but life starts pulling everybody in different directions. And I don't think anybody prepares men for that because nobody sits down and tells you that one day maintaining a friendship is going to require a lot of effort. One day you're going to have to schedule a phone call. One day you're going to have to plan dinner 3 weeks in advance. One day you're going to have to look at your calendar before you can spend time with somebody that you've known for 20 years. And that's not because the friendship got weaker, it's just because life got fuller. Even with Coulter, who I've been friends with for 20 years, we don't talk every day. We don't see each other every week. But when we do talk, it's like no time has passed at all. Back then, we assumed those friendships would always be there. We assumed we'd always stay connected. We assumed we'd always make time. But life has a way of changing things. And before you know it, the people you saw every day become people you haven't spoken to in years. Not because you stopped caring, you just stopped crossing paths. And I think a lot of men experience that without even realizing it. One day you're surrounded by people. The next you're looking through old pictures, old messages, old memories, and you're wondering what happened. Not because anybody did anything wrong, not because there was some big falling out. Life just kept moving. And somewhere along the way, The friendship stopped being part of your routine. And that's not failure. It's just something most men experience. And that's where things begin to change. Most friendships don't end because of conflict. They end because of distance. Not physical distance, but life distance. One friend gets married, another moves away. One starts a business, another starts a family. Somebody starts working nights, somebody else starts traveling for work. And slowly everybody keeps getting pulled in different directions. I think this is especially true for men because men tend to become consumed by responsibility, work, bills, marriage, children, and other responsibilities that take over. And before long, friendship becomes something you plan to get around later. The problem is later turns into months, then years, and eventually you realize you've lost touch with people who once played a major role in your life. You lose touch with your friend group. I've lost touch with a majority of my friends, and it just happened. I wasn't mad at them. We didn't have a falling out. We just grew up. We had kids. Some of us moved states. Some joined the military and left the country. Life just took over, and sometimes life doesn't leave openings for things like friends. Now, I'm not saying our friendships don't exist anymore. I'm just saying they become neglected because we have other responsibilities that take priority. And I think that's where a lot of men find themselves. Not because they don't value friendship, not because they don't care about the people in their lives, but because every day feels like there's something that needs their attention. Work needs attention, the house needs attention, the kids needs attention, the marriage needs attention, the bills need attention, and friendship becomes one of those things that gets pushed to tomorrow. Then tomorrow becomes next week becomes next month, and eventually you realize it's been years since you've had a real conversation with someone who used to be part of your everyday life. And the strange thing is, if they called tomorrow, you'd probably answer. If they needed help, you'd probably show up. If they wanted to go grab dinner, you'd probably make time for them. The friendship didn't disappear, it just got buried underneath everything else life placed on your shoulders. And I think that's something a lot of men carry quietly because we don't always talk about loneliness. We don't always talk about isolation. We don't always talk about missing people who used to be part of our lives. But it happens. And for a lot of men, it happens more than they realize. I think one of the biggest lies men tell themselves is this: I don't need anybody. And the truth is, most of us believe that at some point. Because from the time we were young, we were taught to be independent, to handle our problems, to take care of our responsibilities. Don't complain, push through it. And there's value in that. There are absolutely times where a man needs to be strong. There are times when a man has to carry the weight. There are times when nobody is going to come save you. But that's part of life. Somewhere along the way, a lot of men start confusing strengths with isolation. And those things are not the same. Being independent does not mean you never need people. Being capable doesn't mean you never need support. Being strong doesn't mean you carry everything alone. But a lot of men start living that way. And it's because it's easier. It's easier to say I'm good than it is to admit you're struggling. It's easier to stay quiet than it is to tell somebody what's really going on. It's easier to keep moving than it is to slow down long enough to acknowledge what you're carrying. And before long, you start convincing yourself that this is normal. You go to work, you come home, you take care of your responsibilities, you pay the bills, you handle problems, and every day just starts looking the same. From the outside, everything looks fine. Nobody's worried about you. Nobody's caring or as asking questions because from the outside, it looks like you've got everything under control. But beneath it all, something is missing: connection, brotherhood, community, people who actually know you, not the version of you that shows up at work, not the version of you that handles the responsibilities, not the version of you that everybody else depends on. The real you, the man beneath the roles. And I think that's where a lot of men get stuck because they don't realize that what they're missing until it's already gone. They don't realize how isolated they've become because the isolation happened slowly. It didn't happen overnight. It happened one missed call at a time, 1 year of being too busy at a time, one canceled plan at a time, until eventually the circle got smaller, the conversations got fewer, and the support system you had got thinner. And what's left is a man carrying everything by himself, still functioning, still working, still showing up, but carrying far more than he was ever meant to carry alone. Because despite what a lot of us were taught, men need friendships too. Men need community too. Men need people they can call, people they can trust, people who know what's actually going on. And that's not weakness, that's just being human. When people hear the word lonely, they usually imagine someone sitting by themselves, nobody around, nobody to talk to. But loneliness isn't always being alone. Sometimes loneliness is feeling disconnected. Sometimes loneliness is being surrounded by people and still feeling unseen. You can have a wife, you can have children, you can have coworkers, you can have people around you every single day and still feel disconnected. Because connection isn't about proximity, it's about being known. I remember one of the loneliest times of my life. It was late July 2023. My wife had made the decision to leave me. I was left alone in my apartment, in a city and a state where I had no one. Every single day turned into the same routine: sleep all day, work all night, drink when I wasn't working. I wasn't turning into an alcoholic, but I was drinking more than I ever had. I got my kids on the weekend, but I was alone. Everyone that said they wouldn't abandon me left me high and dry. I was left in a 3-bedroom townhome while everyone turned their back on me. It was a hard period of time for me. And what made it difficult wasn't just being alone, it was feeling like nobody really saw what I was carrying. Most people only saw the surface. They saw me going to work, they saw me getting my kids, they saw me functioning, but they didn't see what was happening when I went home. They didn't see me sitting in that townhome by myself. They didn't see me wondering what my future was going to look like. They didn't see me trying to figure out who I was without my marriage. And I think that's where a lot of men live. Not necessarily alone, but disconnected, surrounded by people who know what they do, but very few people who know what they're carrying. And when that goes on long enough, loneliness starts to feel normal. You stop expecting people to check on you. You stop expecting people to ask how you're doing. You convince yourself you'll figure it out on your own. But carrying everything by yourself comes at a cost. And a lot of us don't realize that until we've been carrying it alone for a very long time. A lot of men don't realize they're lonely because they're too busy, too distracted, too consumed by responsibility until one day they realize they don't have anyone to call. And that realization hits harder than most people expect. Come on, man. There's a reason we need people, because none of us were meant to carry everything alone. That's one of the reasons why I created the roundtable. Not because I have all the answers, but because I know how many men feel isolated, how many men feel unheard, how many feel like they're carrying life alone. Brotherhood matters because perspective matters, encouragement matters, accountability matters, having someone who understands matters. Think about sports, think about the military, think about teams. Nobody succeeds alone. Everybody has support somewhere. Everybody has people around them. I learned that through football. When I got involved in athletic training in high school, I became part of something bigger than myself. There were coaches, players, trainers, managers. Everybody had a role. Everybody depended on each other. And while we were all different, we were all moving towards the same goal. That's what brotherhood does. It gives you people to walk alongside. Later on, I experienced that again when I joined the army. No matter what branch somebody serves in, one thing most service members understand is that you rely on the people around you. You train together, you struggle together. You learn very quickly that trying to do everything alone doesn't usually work. And even though my military journey didn't end the way I originally expected it to, that lesson has always stayed with me. Nobody was meant to carry everything by themselves. I've seen it through coaching too. As a coach, I've watched kids encourage each other, pick each other up after mistakes, celebrate each other's successes, and it's a reminder that we all need people in our corner. That's one of the reasons the roundtable exists. I didn't create this because I have life figured out. I created because I know what isolation feels like. I know what it feels like to think you're carrying everything alone. And I know there are other men out there who feel the same way. Sometimes all somebody needs is to know that they're not the only ones. The difficult part of friendship as an adult is that it requires intention. Nobody is forcing you into the same classroom anymore. Nobody is forcing you onto the same team anymore. Nobody is forcing you into the same environment every day, which means if you want friendship, you have to make an effort. You have to send the text. You have to make the call. You have to invite somebody to lunch. You have to show up. And honestly, that's hard because rejection is possible. What is going on? People are busy. Schedules don't line up. Life gets complicated. But friendship doesn't happen by accident anymore. It happens because somebody decides it matters enough to pursue. And I think that's where a lot of men struggle. Not because they don't want friendship, not because they don't value friendship, but because they're waiting for friendship to happen the same way it used to. They're waiting for life to put people in front of them. They're waiting for somebody else to make them first move. They're waiting for the perfect opportunity. And the truth is, that opportunity may never come. As adults, friendship has to become intentional. You have to decide that it's worth protecting, worth investing in, worth making time for. Because if you don't, life will gladly fill that space with something else. Another responsibility, another project, another obligation. And before you know it, years have passed and you're still telling yourself you'll get around to reconnecting someday. The reality is that someday isn't on the calendar. If friendship matters, it has to become a priority. Even if it's just a phone call, even if it's just grabbing lunch, even if it's just checking in on somebody you haven't talked to in a while. Small efforts over time are what keep friendships alive. I think one of the hardest truths for men to hear is this: the friendship you're looking for may start with you. A lot of men say nobody checks on me, nobody reaches out, nobody calls, nobody invites me anywhere. And maybe that's true. But when was the last time you checked on somebody else? When was the last time you sent the text? When was the last time you invited somebody to grab coffee? When was the last time you reached out first? Because somebody has to go first. And maybe that somebody is you. Not every friendship can be rebuilt. Not every friendship is meant to last forever. But some friendships are only one conversation away from being restored. I know this because I've had to learn that lesson myself. There have been people I've thought about reaching out to, friends I haven't talked to in months, sometimes years. And for whatever reason, I keep putting it off because I'm busy. Maybe they were busy. Maybe I just assumed we'd talk eventually. But eventually has a way of turning into a very long time. And one thing I've realized is that most friendships don't disappear all at once. They fade through neglect. Not because either person stopped caring, but because neither person made the first move. I've been guilty of that. I've sat there wondering why nobody reached out, while at the same time not reaching out myself. And I think a lot of us do that. We wait. We assume they're busy. We assume they don't want to hear from us. We assume too much time has passed. But most of the time, that's not true. Most of the time, people are happy to hear from someone they care about. Most of the time, that awkward conversation we build up in our head never actually happens. It's just two people reconnecting, two people picking up where they left off. So before this week is over, I want to challenge you to think about one person, one friend, one teammate, one former coworker, one person you've been meaning to reach out to. And send the text. Make the call. See what happens. Because there's a good chance they've thought about reaching out too. They're just waiting for somebody to go first. And maybe this week that's the challenge. Reach out. Send the text. Make the call. Reconnect. Because there's a good chance somebody else is sitting there waiting for the exact same thing. As men get older, friendships change. That's just reality. But isolation doesn't have to. Because no matter how strong you are, no matter how independent you are, no matter how much responsibility you carry, life is better when you don't carry it alone. So this week, send the text, make the call, invite somebody to lunch, reconnect with somebody you've been meaning to talk to. You never know how much it might mean to them. And you never know how much you might need it yourself. If you've enjoyed today's episode, make sure you follow the Roundtable for Men on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also follow along on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Thanks again for pulling up a chair today. I'll see you next time on the Roundtable for Men.